All right, Windows, ready, set, go. By the time we're done here, we will walk through the process of configuring Windows with static and dynamic IP addressing information, as well as look at the utilities to make sure that network access is functioning correctly. So without further ado, let's dive in. In Windows 10, there's a couple ways you can go about changing the IP address. I'll show you my preferred way because I'm a little bit old school. I like the control panel. I go straight to the control panel, go to network status and tasks. Now I just double click the icon, but you can also get there from the start menu just by typing in control and it'll pop up the control panel. Now, once you get here, I dive straight over to change adapter settings, which takes me to the network adapters installed on that workstation. Now, one of the things I do is I rename all of the network adapters. Like right here, I have LAN adapter. I'll press F2 on the keyboard and change that name to something nice and logical. Like this one you can see is a USB adapter that I titled Dell Doc NIC, so I know which NIC it is, and it shows up not only here in the control panel, but also in the IP configuration utility that we use from the command line. Now, there's also a way, and I posted on my Twitter feed. I'm not going to dive into do it here, but you can edit the registry to change this name right here. The reason why is Windows 10 automatically detects the network and tries to assign a name with it. So, for example, it detected my home network and it said, "Is this C Home 2?" Because C Home was actually detected on here, and I was like, I don't like that. So I changed the name of it by changing the registry key right here, but I'm way off on a tangent. So here's how you modify the IP address. Right click on LAN adapter, properties, pops up, and you go straight to TCP/IP version 4 if that's the version that you're using. Then right here you have the option to obtain an IP address automatically. That's using DHCP to assign it, which is a whole other topic. I believe Anthony later on is going to create a skill on how DHCP functions and how it assigns addresses and even how to set up your own DHCP server. Most of the time, you're going to be doing that if you're a normal client. If you're in the middle of gritty testing, that's where you'll go with a static assignment. And for example, I could come in here and go 192.168.1. Let's just go with 185 and hope that something else isn't using that on the network. It automatically fills in the subnet mask based on the class of address that defines the network, and that should be defined when you do your subnetting for a site. Now, if you're diving into advanced networking and you're coming up with designs for the different subnets, that's where you'll tweak the subnet mask. But for just assigning an IP address, you won't usually get into that level. Default gateway is the router that gets you off your network, 192.168.1.1 in the case of my house. Then I'm going to come up and go to the preferred DNS server. Well, for me, I could use my default router as a DNS server because it's set up to do that. And I would also use an alternate of 8.8.8.8, which is a public Google server. Click on OK, OK, and now that has been assigned to that LAN adapter. Life is good. You can also go through the Windows settings application. This is kind of the newer way. I don't like it because I'm old, and I like the simple way of using the control panel. I shouldn't even say simple. It's so Microsoft tried to be friendly in the new settings app, and that's good if you like friendly things. I like getting into the grit, so I like a little more control panel. Even command line, you can change your IP address, but let me show you how to do it the friendly way. So open the settings, go to network and internet, pops up and says, okay, well, let's change your connection properties. Okay, which connection do you want to change? I'll click on that. It's saying, well, is this public, private? Here's your manual assignment, and I can click on the edit button. It pops up a nice little friendly box if you want to do that. The reason I'm so, and if you want to go back to DHCP, you can change that right here. The reason I like the control panel way is not only do you get the friendly options, which I showed you right here, but if you want to get into the grit, oh, there's my grit. There's my alternate DNS. Here's my prefixes. Here's how I can read it. Here, just give me some grit. Give me secondary IP address. Ooh, I want to add a second IP address to this computer. 186 because I'm testing something. Give me that functionality. And the settings control panel doesn't do that. By the way, if you want to assign a second and a tertiary and et cetera, all different IP addresses, you can feel free to do that from right here. Even multiple default gateways does all of that from my gritty control panel interface. All that being said, how do we test and make sure this is functional? There are four utilities I want to show you. The first is just verifying the base configuration. You do an IP config and you've got your IP address that we manually typed in, subnet mask, and default gateway destroyed or shown right there. I can do a ipconfig /all, which is where you get a lot more of the data. That's where if you want the MAC address of that adapter, there it is. If you want the brand of network card, there it is. If you want the IPv4 addresses, there it is. Subnet mask, default gateway, DNS information, all of that displayed from ipconfig /all. Now, how do you test? Well, ping is your best friend. I can ping my default gateway and I can see that I'm getting 4 ping responses. If I wanted to ping it a little bit longer, I can do a ping default gateway -T and that'll ping it forever until I stop by hitting Control-C on the keyboard. What if I want to ping a little further? I can do that. Ping 8.8.8.8, there's that DNS server. You can see the time it takes to get there and back is a little bit longer than what it takes to get to my default gateway, which is great. So that's the ping utility. What if I want to see all the routers that I'm going through along the way? Well, that's where I'll do a, not tracing, a trace route. That's Windows version of trace route. And I always put a -D, and then where do I want to go? So let's see how many routers I'm going through along the way to Google's DNS server. Now, what's the -G while it's going along its merry way? Well, the -D says, do not try to resolve host names as it's going about its way. And it looks like right about there, it's blocking me from doing trace routes, and that's fine. If you don't include the -D, it'll try and do what's called a reverse DNS lookup on every single hop, which just makes it take a really long time. Matter of fact, here, I'll see if I can show you that right there. You saw how long that one took, right? Right there, it's like, oh, this is actually ABR 4500.LAN because it was able to do a reverse DNS. You see how slow it's kind of going now? Whereas before it was like bam, bam, bam. It's because it's trying to reverse DNS look up all these things, and most of the time it's going to fail. So I'll hit Control-C and stop that. 2 more utilities. NSLookup, so handy for testing DNS services. A lot of times people think the internet's down, which is a funny comment in itself. That'd be like a world catastrophe. How about your connection to the internet is down simply because they can't access it. When they go to their web browser and they type in something, they're like, it's not getting there. A lot of the time, the network is fine. It's the DNS server having a problem. So my troubleshooting flow in Windows is, okay, can I ping the IP address? I can, good. Okay, let me move up a layer. Can I look up the domain name on the DNS server and translate it to an IP address? So I'll come here and do cisco.com. Bam, I get a response. Google.com. Bam, I get a response. That tells me my DNS server is working just fine. Good. Exit out of this NSLookup utility. Last utility I want to show you is ARP. ARP-A will give me a listing of all the IP address to MAC addresses that this computer has resolved and cached. This helps your computer be fast. First thing that it should do, and by the way, when you first ping something, it's going to sometimes drop the first ping because it's going through the process of figuring out what MAC address that device has, and it does that using the Address Resolution Protocol, or ARP. This is a really handy troubleshooting tool because, first off, I can see if something's not responding, does it at least get an ARP mapping? That's kind of a layer below, a ping, so I can see if it's even online. Likewise, ARP is handy when you do IP address changes on the network. Let's say you've got a computer here, ping a server right here. It's like ping, 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 and then you change the IP address of the server. Well, ARP will remember, or I should say the ARP cache on that client will remember that IP address to MAC address mapping for quite some time, actually 5 minutes, but it'll refresh that every single time it's used and gets a response. So sometimes we may want to go in there, and good old Windows, it's not going to work, but watch this. I'll do ARP-D*. Very handy command, very restricted now with all of the elevated security permissions. The way that you do this, by the way, is you go to your start menu, right-click the command prompt, and hit Run as Administrator. It's going to blank the whole screen out. You probably don't see that, but it's saying, are you sure? And it brings up this ultra micro-sized font command prompt. I don't know why it does. I'm sure there's a technical reason, but that's where I can do an ARP-D*, and I'm sure it's very difficult to see that. But I'll come back here and now do an ARP-A, and you can see it's sifted down to just a couple of these, the ones that it needed to communicate with since I typed in that command. That is really handy when you do IP address changes because it wipes out the cache. Otherwise, you find yourself sitting there for 5 minutes which I know it's 5 minutes, but it's an eternity in network admin years. That is the process of configuring Windows with a static and dynamic IP address and 4 utilities that you can use to test it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.